I am so deeply honored to introduce Dr. Newton Miller as our opening keynote speaker. Dr. Miller's dream was to become a structural engineer. That is, until he stood in front of a classroom of knowledge-hungry inner-city students. Since 1992, Dr. Miller has been a math and science teacher, assistant principal, director of teacher education, and he is now an associate dean at Ashford University. His research and advocacy focus on educating at-risk populations, understanding systems that support student achievement, creating effective school cultures, and facilitating programming and instruction that promotes educational success within non-traditional adult populations. Dr. Miller speaks, consults, and publishes widely on how to support men of color in higher education, addressing the digital divide, and how to educate learners all the way from high school through college, following a mantra of educate, motivate, help them grow. He is speaking with us today on the 3 T's of effective education: thinking, teaching, and technology. Welcome, Dr. Miller.
Well, thank you very much, I appreciate the opening and the welcome. I just have to say honestly that I am honored to be here, honored to be a part of this, because I have a secret, how to say this, when I grow up, I want to be like Tom Tobin. I mean, this guy, he's an amazing gentleman. So I really appreciate his team and what his team is doing, and how it's affecting just this distance education across the country. How to say this, I have been attending this conference. I think this is my 5th year. I found it by accident, and every year since then, I have gone and been a part of this conference. I have made great friends, some super connections. You know, as an administrator or a leader in college ed, you are attending conferences all the time. And this is probably one of my top 3 that I really, I just look forward to. Whether I have funding for it or whether I'm coming out of pocket on this one, I try to make it to this conference, especially when it's face-to-face. I really love the venue, and it's just an amazing experience all over. So I am, I guess, ready to get started here, and I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong because I don't see my PowerPoint. So
just hit that screen share, and it'll replace ours.
Okay, excellent. I apologize for that, you guys, and let's get this up and running, and here we go. So you guys, now that I stalled to get started, we're going to talk today about the 3 T's of effective online instruction. So I like to call it the 3T Triad, and it's basically just thinking, teaching, and technology. Now, I know we're all experts in the whole teaching and technology arena, and hopefully we can share you a couple of morsels in the teaching arena. But thinking, I have found by some research that I've done to be super impactful and really might change how you view the way that you do education. So our agenda today is basically to touch those 3 arenas, those 3 areas. So I'm going to couch the whole thinking idea in a saying that basically says, if you can't relate, then you can't educate. And by the way, you guys, I'm not always super politically correct. So if I say something to offend you, charge it to my head and not my heart. But if you just allow me to be myself for a minute, I think we'll all have a nice, fun experience. I'm also super ADHD, so I don't. I might talk really quickly, and this is a disadvantage of doing these things online, because I can't see the faces of the people in the room. So usually when I talk really quickly, or I go down another, rabbit trail, I'll see their eyebrows, wrinkle up, and I'll know, okay, let me get it correct and bring it back in. So we'll do our best to do that for you today. But other than that, our agenda is basically, if you can't relate, you can't educate. We're going to talk about teaching today. And I'm from my book, Why Some Seeds Don't Grow. One of the chapters is titled Specific Seeds require specific needs, where the seeds are the students that we're teaching and growing, whether it be K-12 or higher ed. And we're going to talk about how that relates to teaching. And then, why turn it down for what? When we have tools and technology to turn this thing up and dial it up to 10 so that everyone can, accomplish mastery equitably and effectively. So if you guys are ready, let's get rolling. So we're going to start with the whole thinking of the first team. So before I show you the next slide, there are 4 pictures I'm going to show you. 4 pictures. And when you look at those pictures, I'm going to give you some time to look at them. I want you to jot down very quickly the first thing that comes to your mind. I mean, it doesn't have to be politically correct. It doesn't have to be reasonable. I'm looking for the real thing, not the right thing, the real thing that comes to your mind when you see this picture. Okay? So don't think about anything else or anyone else. Just what comes to your mind instantly. You guys ready? Let's go. There's the first meme. The first picture. What comes to your mind? What thought? What pushback? What positive thing? What negative thing? What word? Since you're jotting it down, it could be any word. But go ahead and jot that down. I'll give you a few more seconds, and we're going to go to the second picture. Here's the second one. What comes to your mind? First thing you see. First thing you think. What reaction? What feeling? What agreement? What disagreement? What pushback? What pull? What's there? There's no right or wrong. You ready for the third picture? Here's one. I apologize for the pixelization. I couldn't find a high resolution, but I think we've all seen this picture. I think you get the point of it. What comes to your mind? What do you see? What emotions are invoked? What thoughts? What words? What's going on in there? Give me the real thing, not the right thing. Give me the real thing. I have one more for you. Ready? So for this last one here, if you can't read the words on the building, it says Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood. What comes to your mind when you see this picture? Again, give me the real thing, not the right thing. Give me the real thing. What word, what emotion, what feeling, just quickly jot it down. Few more seconds. That was the fourth one. So here's what we're going to do now. After seeing these and getting you stirred up a little bit on purpose, right? I'm going to go back to that first picture, but I am going to give you, based on, I did read a lot of things, and you can hear opinions on both sides of the pendulum. Right, so I'm going to share with you kind of what I've summed up from many things that I've read that people might think or feel about each of those pictures, but I'm going to give you the opposites on both sides of the pendulum. Are you ready? So for the first picture, some people could say, listen, man, these people are justifiably angry. I mean, this whole system that we've lived in, for over 400 years was set up and imbalanced, from the beginning. It was inequitably designed. So they're just angry and fed up and tired, so their anger is justified. But on the other side of the fence, some folks can say, listen, these people are living in denial, D-E-N-I-L. They don't even know I am lying. I mean, how can you be so upset about something that someone does outside of your community in a smaller degree when you have similar things happening from people inside your community at a greater concentration? So that's transference, isn't it? And anytime you transfer something, isn't that, not healthy? In the second picture, one's pendulum side of the argument could say, listen, this flag is a symbol of history. It shows pride and brotherhood. It represents an era of our country and struggles and a belief system that people had and stood and died for. But on the other side of the argument, it could say, listen, it's a dark history, and it represents a lot of pain and suffering in an oppressive era where inhumane things happen to people. It even shows defiance in the Constitution of the United States and how it stands today. Two sides of the argument. The third picture. Some might say, hey, listen, this gentleman was courageous. I mean, he put his neck on the line despite any losses that he might have taken monetarily or physically or in his reputation. And it was a profound argument, a profound stance. Brilliant, actually. It actually brought light to an issue across the world, and it was a nonviolent stand. It caused people to either accept or understand that there was an issue, or to examine themselves to figure out why there isn't one. You know, and then on the other side of the fence, some people could say, well, you know what, this whole thing was like totally disrespectful. It disrespected our flag. It disrespected our national anthem. I mean, it was dishonorable to the people who lived and died for our country, who, you know, bled blood, sweat, and tears into making this place what it is, the greatest country on the planet. You know, he was ungrateful. I mean, millions of dollars that he was making, you know, as a public figure, and instead of bringing unity, he was dividing us in an act of what could be considered treason. On the fourth picture, some folks might say, listen, abortion, man, this is a viable option. You know, they made a mistake. And they weren't ready for a child. So they corrected that mistake before damaging their life and another life. You know, in essence, they were saving their future and the future of another human being instead of perpetuating poverty and abuse and just poor situations and circumstances. Some might say that, you know, abortion is the right thing for some folks. On the other side of the fence, some might say, listen, hey, man, abortion is murder. It's a sinful thing. It's a blatant disregard for life in whatever form or stage of that life, you know, that it may exist. It's irresponsible before life is produced, and it's irresponsible after life exists. It's a denial of the possibilities of what a life could bring and produce and cause a change of the quality of living for all human beings. It's just a denial of possibilities. So those are the four pictures that I just provided for you. And those are two sides of the arguments. And you're probably saying to me, okay, this is a distance teaching and learning conference. What the heck is he doing? Why is he talking about this stuff? How does this fit into teaching and learning? Well, you have to understand that thinking affects everything. And even us as individuals, as educators, as we saw those pictures, some emotion, some thought, some feeling came to the forefront of your mind. Even in our educated state, where we've developed our frontal lobe and we can reason, and we don't have to operate from our primitive brain with fight and flight, right? What I'm trying to tell you, that your thinking has been affected by the experiences and the things to which you've been exposed from the time you were born. All of us have been exposed to things. It was either what was said to us or not said, what was done to us or not done, the resources we had or the resources that were not available to us, who was around us, you know, the music, the movies, all of those things began to shape our thinking from the time we were infants. And before we even knew we had a choice to make any decisions, we had already been, I'm going to say, culturized and moved in a pathway of thinking or culture before we were even aware, right? And those things are already, not already, but still in us. They still impact and affect our thinking. Now, we have some control over those things, but why is something like this a great start for a teaching and learning conference when we're talking about thinking? Because we need to understand that those issues and thoughts that you just had, your students have too. We have to understand that our students come to us already, you know, with some opinion, already with some direction and thought, already with some culture. They're not empty vessels. And the thoughts that they have about these issues, that's secondary because there's already a culture, or there's already experiences and exposures that are driving and impacting all their thoughts, and that's going to affect how they react to the content that you're teaching and how you're delivering the content. So our students aren't empty vessels. We can't just, turn on the faucet and fill up their brain with what we want to fill it up in a nice, neat manner. And then when we're finished, turn off the faucet and then pass them on to the next educator. It doesn't work that way. Our students come to us as full vessels. I don't care who they are, where they are, what culture, how old, I don't care what they've been exposed to. They come to us as full vessels. They already have bandages and bruises on their brains from what they've been experienced and been exposed to throughout their life, to the point that they've come to us. There's already opinions and pain and good experiences and bad experiences. And we have to learn to respect that. But here's what we do. As educators, we have this funnel of great stuff that we want to funnel into their brain. Now, what we have is awesome. It's great. It's super information. It's wonderful experiences. It's things that will unlock doors of possibility and cause them to think in arenas and areas that they never thought before. So it's great stuff that we want to give them, and we have great modalities in which we want to give it to them. However, when we begin to force it into their brain without respecting what was already there, not only do we add to the bruises and the bandages, you'll start to see that brain start to smoke up and steam up because we'll begin to overload it. And here's kind of what happens, especially with people who are from at potential or marginalized populations. So people from at potential and marginalized populations, they look at us as the professors, as the experts in the content. And because we're the experts in the content, when their thinking or their thoughts around a topic is different than ours, they tend to back up and back down because that's been how they've survived all of their lives. So when they don't agree with us, they think that they're wrong. And if we continue to push things into their minds, it begins to have an adverse effect as far as education is concerned. Meaning this, instead of them becoming more curious and pushing forward in a more Socratic way or an inquiry-based manner, they could step back and feel like, I'm just not good at this education thing. Or there could also be an internal response where their self-esteem or self-image is challenged, and there's an even greater damage done to that person, which can spill over to different parts of their lives. Our students are not empty vessels. They're full, and we must respect that thinking. But see, as educators, we tend to categorize everything in our world around course content. Whether we're inside a classroom or outside of a classroom, here's kind of what we do. We create a rubric. We backwards design everything. We create a rubric, and that rubric has categories in it, and we begin to categorize things and people and events as to how they fit into or master the different sections of the rubric that we've created. See, our job, what we've done as an educator, it's part of who we are, is we present content to people, and we want them to master that content. But what happens is we already have a way in which we are going to measure whether that content is mastered. And that could be good with math, science, English, social studies. But when we're talking about people, we don't get to say that. Right? So we begin to categorize folks around course content, right? And not necessarily the content of their character. So we don't actually always factor in their thinking. How do I know this? Let me show you how. So remember the 4 pictures I showed you that you were wondering what the heck was he doing? When you saw those pictures, did you accept the other side of the argument? See, because we all either lean to one side or the other. We might not agree with everything on one side or the other, but we leaned one side or the other, right? We're thinking individuals. So something is wrong if we don't think and have a, because we're thinking individuals. Did you accept that other side, or did you immediately begin to defend your position and pick apart why someone would justify the other side of that argument? Did you even ask why that person on the other side of the argument took that stance? Or what may have happened in their lives so that they even think that way, that justification that they have makes sense? We probably did not do that. Why? Because we were focused on the content. We were focused on the end result. So the thinking did not factor in to our categorization, and because the other person's thinking didn't factor in, then there were some gaps in the way that we could actually facilitate any type of learning or moving forward from that person. So I'm saying as educators, we have to take a holistic approach to our students. We have to consider what's going on in their lives inside the classroom as well as outside the classroom. Their culture, not ours, their culture, their standard operating procedure, their way of life is what we must consider when we want to instruct them. It's stemmed in their thinking. So on the right-hand side here, you see a picture of the metro station or the metro, system in Washington, D.C. So I lived in D.C. for a couple years when I was working as a structural engineer, and I worked in Crystal City, Virginia. But I lived over on Minnesota Avenue. I stayed with some relatives who lived in Northeast off of Minnesota Avenue in a project called Greenway Apartments. And I would get on that train every morning, the orange line, and transfer to the yellow line and ride down to Crystal City, unless I wanted to take the long ride, and I take the blue line all the way around and go down to Crystal City, right? So if you were to ask someone in DC, what's the main station for the metro system? They'll probably say this station right here, the Metro Center. Well, that makes sense. Metro Center, metro stations, the main station. They built it to be the main station, right? But something I learned when I was in DC for those couple of years is that the vast majority of the people, and I actually checked this data to make sure, the vast majority of people that use the Metro Center, they live in the Northeast and the Southeast areas of Washington, D.C. In those two areas are some very economically dilapidated communities where many folks don't even have any other transportation. So the rail lines and the buses for the metro system is their mode of transportation. So you'll see a high concentration of users of the metro system in Northeast and Southeast, right? So if I was to ask someone from Northeast or Southeast in one of those socioeconomically distressed communities, what's the main station for the Metro Center, they're not going to say Metro Center. They're going to say this one that is circled in yellow. They're going to say L'Enfant Plaza is the main station. Well, why would they say L'Enfant Plaza? Because 4 of the 5 lines go through that station, where only 3 of the 5 lines go through the Metro Center. So if they go through Metro Center, they're going to have to do another transfer. They're going to have to catch another bus. It's going to be more inconvenient for them. They're going to have to add more time. They're going to have to do something which means they got to do something with their babysitter and making sure dinner's ready. And I mean, it has a whole nother snowball list of things that take place. So to them, they want to go from L'Enfant Plaza because it's advantageous for them. So what's this have to do with us, again, with this whole teaching and learning conference? I'm submitting to you that as educators, we very often teach our courses. As instructional designers, we build our courses. As administrators, we support and build courses and build programs, and as support folks, we support those courses from the Metro Center. When our students, or many of our students, are frequenting L'Enfant Plaza. I am submitting to you that very often we're missing the mark with our students because we're not taking into account their culture, their inside and outside classroom life, and how that impacts their thinking so that we can adjust our services to meet them where they are, so they don't have to inconvenience their life anymore and take an extra transfer to get to where we need them to be. So I did a study some time ago, about 3 years now, with some men of color. So there were 1,300 men of color that participated in this study. So really all I was looking for was what did men of color who were successful in their program. And by successful in their online programs, we define that as they had a 3.0 GPA for at least 2 semesters, and they either graduated or were on track to graduate at the 125% rate. So 3.0, 2 semesters in a row, and 125% rate. There were some other smaller things, but those were the largest. All I want to know is, so what do you do to maintain and obtain and maintain success in your academic program, your online program? So there were 3 online universities that participated with me. I had about 1,300 participants in the study, and what we found was basically there were 6 common techniques and methods that those men of color implemented or put in place in their academics to be successful. There were some in advising and some with support services. So I saw that 6, right? And I got so I grew up in the projects. I grew up in the hood, right? So there's a saying in the hood that says, keep your head on the swivel so you don't get caught leaning. So those 6 techniques and methods, when I found them, they were too easy. So I was like, oh, something's got to be wrong here. So I had a group of men of color who didn't quite make the mark to be considered successful in the original study. So I pulled about 100 of them, and I asked them, would they take the same bank of surveys and first round of interviews? They did, and we found that 75% of those men of color, not necessarily considered successful, also implemented some, arrangement of those 6 techniques and methods. So now I'm like, okay, this is a problem, because that means the techniques and the methods, they're not the major driver for success. What am I going to do? So I get a little discouraged. I'm not going to lie to you. But then I remembered Metro Station and L'Enfant Plaza. So what I did was I got out of Metro Station and I went to L'Enfant Plaza, and I looked at my data from a totally different vantage point that was more qualitative in nature. And something fascinating that actually changed the way that I view and do education all around jumped off that page and just punched me right in my big old nose. I saw that 97.8% of those men of color, those 1,300 men of color, all operating in what I'm calling the same 3 pillars of mind. They all thought the same. Now this was super, because now it didn't mean that, now I understood that, not just are the techniques and the methods not the major driver, it's these the men of color, it's their thinking. They already had within themselves everything they needed to succeed. So all we have to do is figure out ways to make that type of thinking conducive. We need to figure out ways to make it contagious in our programs and in our courses so they can map their thinking to our techniques and methods and be successful. I was like fascinated with that. Now, why I chose men of color, I want to explain this to you, not just because I just happen to be a black man and I have, I want to, some give back to some folks that just happen to look like and be like me. I understood that for the last 2 decades at least, men of color have been the lowest performing subgroup from PK through 16 on any academic battery. So if they've been the lowest performing, and in particular, black males and my Latinx brothers, they've been the lowest performing. So I figured if we can figure out what works with the lowest performing group, then that could translate not just to help them, but translate as good best practices for groups that aren't performing so low. So the 3 pillars of mind that I found are these, and I'm going to try not to get bogged down here because this really is fascinating to me. The first pillar of mind was positive experiences. Now let me kind of explain something real quick with this. Give me a few minutes to explain it. So if you've never really operated or worked with an at-potential population or marginalized population, then you might not understand that population, the vast majority of them are going to operate with something that I call a survival mindset. A survival mindset. So for purposes of this conversation, we have a survival mindset and we have an investment mindset. Investment mindset means you'll sacrifice now because you know something can be produced later. You have the means to support yourself now and look forward and direct resources from today so you can build your tomorrow, right? Someone from an at potential marginalized population did not necessarily grow up with those types of resources, did not necessarily have that example in front of them. So that survival mindset says, what I get now, I need to make work for now so I can survive first. And then I'll take whatever I have extra to invest in building my tomorrow. So it's a difference in thinking. And I mean, we can really talk for a while about why that is, but that survival mindset also has a magic skill with it, a superpower. That superpower is people that operate in that survival mindset can raise and lower an invisible wall at will. They raise that wall and they can get behind that wall and hide and be safe. Or they can raise that wall and get behind that wall and create a quiet place so they can think and figure out what's next. Or for purpose of this talk, they raise that wall so that you can't see them how they really are. They raise that wall, and here's what's nice about that wall. It's like a one-way mirror. They can produce a picture of themselves so that you can only see what they want you to see. And what they want you to see is what they think you want to see based on the experiences that they've had with you, right? But on this side of the fence, here's the deal. They're looking at you from their vantage point of their experiences, right? And their opinion of you. So the wall not only filters them from you so you can see them the way they want you to, it filters you from them. So now they're seeing you with a presumption based on the experiences that they've had with you and rolling back into their memory of schema of things that have happened in the past. So when that wall goes up, man, not only does it push students away from you, it pushes you away from them, and you don't even know it. So what you could possibly give them is dampened, and what they could possibly add to your experience is dampened as well. So this happens a lot of times. Well, let me just say it like this. When I say positive experiences, that's you have to understand that with at potential populations or marginalized populations, if they've had a negative experience at your institution, they come to your institution, and here's the deal. When we come to the institution is they, it's them. So what I mean by this, have you ever said, well, I'll do what they say, or, when they tell me the rules, or when they tell me how much, and it's like, well, actually, who's they? Really, right? So the they is this system. I don't want to offend anybody. It's like, the man, the organization, I don't know, this thing, right? So whenever at potential marginalized person from marginalized population comes to your institution, they're already seeing you as them, as this large institution, right? So the experience that they have right away will determine how they're going to respond and react so they can survive in that situation. So if they have a negative experience, right away that wall goes up and everything that I just described to you is starting to take place, right? And here's the deal. If they have a negative experience, then we'll expect more negative experiences. What we have is what we'll expect. Right? So if I have a negative experience, I'll expect one. So that negative experience might not be that person's fault. The person, serving them might not be their fault. It could be the institution. So for instance, institution has laws, and not laws, but rules and policies and things like that they put in place. And those things may have happened years ago when socially we were different as a country, right? And now we have procedures and policies and things that people are just following and don't even know why or where they came from. So they're just following the rules, doing their job, but it could be a negative experience to someone from an potential marginalized population, right? So it might not be that person's fault. So why I'm saying this to you is that if you have policies and procedures going on and you don't actually know why, especially in this era, in this pandemic to pandemonium area that we're living in, you might want to rethink your procedures, your policies, and all the things that are going on with what you say, because you want to make sure everyone's having good experience. So back to this pillar one. Why do I say positive experiences? Because these successful men of color, they had a positive experience when they walked into those institutions, whether it was with admissions, advising, the financial folks, the tutoring folks, the instructors, whoever they came in contact with, they had positive experiences. So they expected positive experiences. They never put that wall up. And because they never put that wall up, they could glean everything possible from their experience at the university, and the university could glean everything possible from them. They felt valued. One thing you never want to do, and I'll move on to number two, but at potential and marginalized populations, is make them feel tolerated in any way. You never want them to feel disrespected, tolerated, or just put up with or undervalued. We have to focus on equity. I'm not saying make any special rules. I'm saying equity. So because that didn't happen, these men of color have positive experience, they expected positive experience, and the greatest maximum return both ways could happen. The second pillar was that they all had commitments to their personal goals. So in essence, life happens and the storms of life come and it blows us off track and the tectonic plates beyond our feet shift us, and what was once our goals, dreams, and aspirations right in front of us, the winds blow and we're now off center, right? That happens to all of us. We all have goals, dreams, and aspirations that happen. So why is this great with these people? Well, most people, what they'll do is when life gets off center, they'll find a way to adjust those goals, dreams, and aspirations to meet the new norm of their life and bring the goals, dreams, and aspirations to them. These men of color, when the life happened and the storms and everything got out of whack, here's what they did. They found ways to adjust the new norms of their life so they can move their life back front and center with the goals, dreams, and aspirations. They adjusted themselves, not the goals, dreams, and aspirations. Their commitment to their personal goals, dreams, and aspirations was solid, unmovable. They said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to do this thing, that spot on the wall, and they would not move. The third thing was they basically all had obligations, whether it was taking care of, an elderly parent or a sick relative, or they had children, wives, or, just properties, their jobs. They might have worked first shift this week, third shift the next week. They all had those things that we all would have said, listen, man, you got a lot going on in your life. There's no harm in you stepping back and taking a break, right? They just about all of them had those kind of situations going on. But to them, they looked at those obligations not as an excuse or something they could use to put a pause in their educational experience. They looked at them as motivators to keep going. They figured, listen, because I have these obligations, I need this education to open up new opportunities for me so I can handle these obligations even better. So they were motivators and not just deterrences. Positive experiences, commitment to personal goal, and motivators. Obligations were motivators. These three things shaped the thinking of those men of color so that they stayed positive and were able to be successful. So what I'm saying to you, man, is that thinking matters. We have to learn how our students think. And I just told you how at potential marginalized populations think. And I give you a slide a little later with some alignments to it so you could use that, in your own programs. So once we learn how they think, right, then we'll understand how they perceive us, because what people perceive is what they receive. What they perceive is what they receive, right? And those perceptions are real to them. I don't have time to tell you, but there's a little story. I just run through it real quick. I had a story with a gentleman. I grew up with a young man who just happens to be white in the same low-income area that I grew up in. And I mean, like we were like brothers. We covered for each other, like he told fibs to my mom, I told fibs to his. So, we grew up all the way together. We kind of went different ways when it came college time and, kind of rejoined as adults. Well, we were talking very recently and it was, we were talking, and another friend of mine who happens to be black brought up the whole Black Lives Matter terminology and said to my white friend, who he doesn't know, we're like brothers, right? Says, you probably think all lives matter, right? And he said, yeah, I do. I think all lives matter. I'm not black, right? So my black friend didn't know the background of my white friend, and he already perceived, that my white friend was downplaying Black lives because of that statement, right? So that's how he interpreted what my friend was saying. So my friend, I kind of look at him and laugh because I know him, right? He sees that the other gentleman is upset. So he goes back to describe who he was and how he knows me, begins to talk about different places in the hood and different things like that to kind of qualify himself. And why he said that was because he said, yes, Black lives do matter. Everyone matters. But I'm going to say all lives matter because I just don't happen to be black, right? So he wasn't dividing the racial things, and the statement that he said might not have been politically correct, but what he meant it wasn't interpreted the way that he meant it because he had some qualification. So at that point, kind of what took place was my black friend then perceived exactly what the gentleman was saying and what he meant. He then changed his interpretation, and the priorities of the conversation flipped a whole nother way. So it no longer was combative. The priorities of the conversation flipped, where it was really talking more about kind of things that we did growing up, and how you know, it was great to be brothers, whether we were white, black, or whatever. So I'm telling you to learn how your students think, so you can understand how they're perceiving what you're saying and why you're saying it, so you can make sure that the priorities are correct in the classroom and it focuses on the instructional piece, right? And if you learn how they might think, then the next thing you need to do is learn to think like them. So that means you got to step away from where you are, off of your high stool, and stop being a professor and just be Newt, and ask questions when you don't know, and have conversations as a person, right? And what that will do is that will let you create a strategy in your classroom, so you can put techniques and methods in place that match their thinking, so everyone can be successful. Well, what do I mean by that? A lot of times in education, we use strategy, methods, and techniques interchangeably. I'm using them differently. Strategy is the overall approach, the game plan. So in my classes, my strategy is to create an environment where equitable access to mastery is attainable to everyone. That's my strategy. I walk into any class, I don't care what subject I'm teaching, or if I'm building a course or a program, equitable access to mastery, that's the strategy. Well, how do I do that? I have some techniques. I put accommodations in place, and we'll tell you what accommodations are in a few when I get into the teaching. And we also I watch my students, and I see where they might have pitfalls. I see where they might have rough points. I see, you know, the patterns, and then I build things and put things in place that will help them with those rough patches that they might encounter. So strategy and techniques have to match your students' thinking, because thinking matters. So in essence, what I'm saying to you is, if you can't relate, then you just simply can't educate. Specific seeds require specific needs, and that's how you become a great teacher. So here's a Dr. Newt quote: contrary to popular belief, what everyone thinks, online settings present at potential populations with a great opportunity to thrive. It's not a negative for them, it's a positive. If you do these two things, first of all, never assume that your students are all mainstreamed. Bad assumption. And understand and accept unequivocally and wholeheartedly that you are the English as a second language teacher. You are the special education teacher. You are the gifted and talented education teacher, or whatever else is needed of those students. You are it, and you're able to do that whether you've been trained to do it or not in the online environment, right? I say use what I call the Janet Jackson principle. So when we teach we teach students, so I teach teachers to be teachers, get them certified, right? Build the programs to do that. This is one of the things that we focus on. Listen, you need to humanize and connect in your classroom. All of us were taught that in the online classroom. First thing they say, humanize yourself and connect with your students. So here's what we do, most of us. We'll put pictures up of our family, you know, of our beautiful house and our dog and our pool in the backyard, or our trip to Aspen skiing and how we took the whole family and we had Christmas in the ski lodge in front of the 25-foot Christmas tree and traded gifts and ate hot chocolate and roasted marshmallows. And then for the summer, we went to our friend's yacht and we went fishing, and we showed the giant swordfish that we caught, and how my children were jet skiing, and all those things are great. I want to do those things. Don't get me wrong. They're great things. Done some of them, right? But here's the deal. If your students that you're teaching are from a socioeconomic background, and that is their means and that's their reality and it's attainable to them, it's great. They'll connect. But if they're not, you just showed them how different you are than them. And that wall I talked about starts to go up, because now they feel like you need to see them based on, you know, what you think is important. So they'll paint a picture of themselves for you to see, and now they're hiding behind that wall. And again, like I said, that transition back and forth is now dampened. They can't gain from you all that they can, and you won't be able to see into them to give them all that you can or gain anything from them. So when I say humanize around what you can, when I call it the Janet Jackson principle, because you're humanizing what you can control. Remember her song, Control, right? And it's around what you can do for them lately. So how do I do that? In my classes, when I introduce myself, I have a little video and I say, listen, you guys, I totally understand the online, I understand what's going on in your life in this online program. I did a degree online. And when I did that degree, man, I had just got a promotion to be a principal of a middle school that had 1,100 students in the urban arena. Now, I know most of my students wouldn't be a principal, but I think they'll understand job, promotion, new things. I have 5 children. I had 1 in elementary, 1 in middle, 2 were in high school, and 1 was in college at that time. And I had a wife, and we had a blended family, and we hadn't been married that long. My life was full, and I struggled through that online degree. So I know what you're going through. So here's what I can control for you. I can control what goes on in this content and the conversations we have around this content. And I can put some accommodations in place to help you with, or tools to help you with things that might come up so that you can have a success experience in this class. So that's how I connect. That's how I humanize. It's around the thing that we have in common, which is the content. And as we build relationships in the class, if they want to see a picture of my dog, well, I don't have a dog. You know, I'll send them a picture, you know, but until then, this is where we stand, because teaching the content is where I'm at. So like I said, I do accommodations off the bat. So for my folks who may not know what accommodations are, because I know everyone's not trained as an educator, accommodations are tools that you put in place. So for instance, say I'm nailing a nail in the wall and I have a screwdriver nailing the nail in the wall. And you walk by and you see me nailing that nail with that screwdriver. You know, I'm hitting my fingers and the nail is hardly going in, if it's going in at a wall at all, if it's a hard wall. And here's what you do. You go back to your kitchen and the bottom drawer in your kitchen and pull out a hammer for me. That's where you guys keep. I know that's where we keep them. So you go to the bottom drawer in the kitchen, you get the hammer and you come back and you give it to me and you show me how to use it and help me nail that first nail in. And then you say, okay, nail another one so I can make sure you have it. And I nail another nail in. So as long as you're there, I can use your hammer, right? But when you leave, you take your hammer with you, so I have to now go buy my own and put it in my toolbox. So whenever I need to nail a nail in, I know to get that hammer and nail that nail in quicker, more securely, and I can move on to the next task easier, right? I'm not so focused on trying to nail the nail when really what I want to do is hang the picture, right? So an accommodation is a tool to get a job done. It doesn't dumb down the job. It doesn't mean that you're lowering your standards or content in any way. You're just giving them a tool to get things done that they didn't have before, right? So when I say equitable access to mastery, that's what accommodations do. Accommodations address all the diverse needs, whether academic, social, environmental, whatever need that has. It's a tool so you can get the job done. I just want you to write the paper. I just want you to show mastery. I want you to present the project. I want you to, whatever the case is. This is a tool to help you do it. It helps you skip through the good stuff. Let me give you a quick story. I used to teach calculus in the urban district. So there were 7 students in the class. We were in North Philadelphia. We were in the heat of things, right? There were 7 students in the class. And if you know anything about urban students, you're going, a vast amount of students, no matter how high they climb in education, you're going to see some gaps in early literacy and early arithmetics in math, right? So I'm teaching them calculus. And I started, you know, I think we were doing something with, I can't remember exactly who it was. I think it was derivatives and, exponents. And I remember the word problems, and they had to, integrals, they had to figure out which formula to use and how to translate that formula all the way down to the solution and what that solution meant to the word problem. So they were doing great with the calculus. They figured that out, right? They figured that out. So they did great with the calculus, and they had problems with the math. So I said, why are you focused so much on the fractions? They couldn't add, subtract the fractions. They were like, well, you can't do that to do this. I was like, well, listen, you have a calculator. Just do the fractions on the calculator and keep going with the calculus. So in essence, the calculator was the accommodation. It let me skip to the good stuff, right? So they weren't focusing on the small conversation, the fractions. They were focusing on the calculus. So in essence, the accommodations don't dumb things down. They make the conversation more relevant in your class so you can increase the rigor of what's going on, right? You become the gateway to the next, not an obstacle from it. Let's show you real quick some accommodations that you could put in place in your classroom. And I'm not going to stick around here long because we could talk 3 hours just on these, especially we have some traditional folks. Relaxed deadlines, and all these are, these first 5 are ones that, 6, I'm sorry, are ones that we put in place in all of our courses and our programs that I lead across the board. And in 5 quarters, we saw the failure rate in those courses drop from 14% down to about 3%. We saw the retention rate go up. Where were we at? 84%, and we're hanging around 97%. So students who start our courses finish them, and most of them pass. So relaxed deadlines, simply this. If something's due on Monday at 11:59, and I know I'm not going to grade it till Thursday, right? But when I look in there Thursday and on Canvas it said late, many of my colleagues will just, either not accept it or, put such a big hit on that assignment that it really damages the student's grades. Well, what we've learned is when we think about the student's life inside and outside, we can relax those deadlines, and we can give some leeway. Whether it's with penalty or without penalty, with explanation, whatever the case may be, those relaxed deadlines help students do better. I was speaking at a college once, and this was a 2-day professional development. I came down off the stage on the second day. We developed things, and the one gentleman was like, listen, I don't like these relaxed deadlines. I tell my students, if they turn in something after the deadline, it's 2 days, 2 points each day. And I found that after 3 days, they have it all in. I don't like relaxed deadlines. I gave him a high five and I said, you're effectively using deadlines. He put it in the syllabus. The students know about it, and they within 3 days. So 3 days is 6 points. So that's not going to take them, from one grade level to the next. So the students are using the time wisely if they need it, because he put the option there for them, right? So exemplars as examples is another great one. Every assignment that you have, put some student work in there for the students to see. What's the A paper look like? Show them what that A paper or project looks like before they even start theirs, so that they can jumpstart their thinking. You'll see the quality of the work you get back ramp up. And the other deal is it'll probably be in a similar format, which makes it easier for you to grade when you have 40 students in a class. I not F is incomplete, not failing. So we give students feedback, and we give it to that student. That student has an option to turn it back in for a different grade. Now, in the education department, we want our students to take the theory and the practice and bridge it together, because they're going to be teaching young people. And we need to also demonstrate to them what they need to do so they can help their students be successful. So the I not F for us, what we do is we put a 0 on the work, and we give them a message. We say, when you resubmit, email me or text me, and I'll change your grade. So we don't even give them an option. If they choose to keep the 0, then that's on them. And the reason we do that is because we deal with at potential populations. If I put that 70 on there, and that potential population of survival mindset says I can survive with a 70, but if I put the 0 there, they're going to say I can't survive with that and do it again. Access and availability, where accessible. Many of us, I'll pick out one, give them our cell phones. A lot of people don't like to give their cell phone number out. Well, there's Google Talks, and there's different apps where you can email the app and it'll text you, or the app will give you, some of them that are paid, give you another number that the students use, and they text your real number. Those intro videos weekly explain what's going on each week, but in layman's terms. Break it down to them in layman's terms. This is one of the most powerful right here, I believe. Number 6, course at a glance. So say you had 2 discussions, a journal, and an assignment in a week. You give them a real quick two-sided chart that says discussion 1, look at the resource and respond to the prompt. And for instance, it says the journal, it'll say visit, teach, interview a teacher in the classroom, and respond to the questions or write the questions, and you'll say 2 hours. So you kind of give them what they need to do and how long it's going to take for them. Very helpful for at potential marginalized populations, because it keeps them focused on all the things they need to do in their life. They can keep their goal in front of them and see how they can do life, and keep their obligations to the people that they're helping outside the classroom. So if you had time, I would say to you, which of these are already in play in your department or in your classroom. So if there's ones that you recognize, great. If not, we can help you place them in, and my contact will be up for, if you like to contact us later to see how we put them. My point is this, you guys, in all of our online courses, I believe that those accommodations should be implemented in some varied degree of use based on your personal style. Like I gave you the example of the gentleman that likes the 2 points, or me, where I'm wide open and I take it up to the last day of course, or depending on what discipline you're teaching. In education, we teach to mastery, so students can do that for their students. In business, there's deadlines. There's what do we call them? Grants and payrolls and different proposals need to be done. So they are a little different. They're going to be a little different with relaxed deadlines. So they should be consistent in all courses, but in whatever degree meets that discipline and the personal style. And what these things will do for your students is simple. Listen, for all students, accommodations will increase the rigor. Told you that. For potential students, you put those tools available for them. What it's going to do is decrease the anxiety. They already know that you put something in place specifically for them, for their needs. It reduces the anxiety, and they're more apt to attack and go after the content. So when I have those tools available, I actually get very few things late because they know they can turn it in late. So the anxiety is not there. They just go ahead and work with us. For your advanced students, they may or may not use those accommodations, but I guarantee you as they see them, they'll take those accommodations and implement them in other parts of their lives so they increase their management skills and they're more productive all around. This is the slide I was telling you, I'm not going to go through it, that has the pillars. So you have 10 techniques and methods here that you can implement. And on the side, I have how they map to each pillar of mine that I explained to you. Very powerful slide if you're looking to implement this technique in your programs or courses, right? I've got to get up out of here, but as far as tools for technology, I like to say this: turn down for what? When I have technology to turn it all the way up. See, once we seek to understand and we know what our students' thinking is and how they're operating, we can then implement methods and techniques and our strategies to meet them even more, right? So we could then switch into that whole facilitation mode where what we're doing is using technology to meet the needs of our students. Technology is a tool we use so we can do all this teaching in a wonderful way. Technology allows that whole flipped learning thing to take place where we can put resources first and have students look into the content first. So when we get together, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, they're already informed, and we can ramp up our conversations, work on projects, or whatever the case may be, however you design that course. We could put videos and tutorials in place as responses to frequently asked questions. So technology lets me see what students are doing across the board. So in our classes, we use what's it called, the master course method. So courses are pretty much static. Even if you're building your own courses, you're building them, so they're pretty much static based on how you're building them, right? So I know I got a couple minutes left here. I want to explain that this technique of using the videos and tutorials means you can already put answers to questions that students have before they get to the point that they need those answers to those questions. Technology allows you to do that. The face-to-face class, you have to do it each time. Technology, you do it once. Copy and paste, put it there, and it's available. You can put resources in place that deal with students based on their multiple intelligences. So look at that resource down the bottom where you have Donna Beagle talks about oral and print culture. Most students from at-potential populations operate in an oral culture, not a print culture. So when you have those long explanations that are so beautifully written, you've lost them. So make a real quick video and just tell them what you need them to do. They'll be with you a whole lot, it'll be a whole lot smoother. As far as assessments, man, technology explodes your opportunities and your possibilities for assessments. It makes formative assessment a way of life, not just for you, but for your students. You can offer more. I don't even care if the course has one summative assessment. You can put little assessments in through your announcements or discussions or however you want to chunk your content in smaller pieces so you can redirect instruction more frequently so students are more successful. And that technology brings you the feedback right away. And when you get that feedback right away, man, you can adjust on the dime for your students, and everybody is way more accessible. The technology is going to dispense that knowledge, makes demonstration of mastery more ready for you. But teaching is still required, you guys, even though technology is so powerful. So keep in mind, you still got to work in those dynamic groups. I don't care whatever form they are, small, whole, recorded, asynchronous, or not. You still got to do that whole positive reinforcement thing. Find ways to do it individually as a whole class. I do weekly shout outs for my discussions, the top 5, and I send them, I put it in my announcements, then I send it out to everyone in email, and they all kind of shoot for those shout outs, right? You got to be accessible. Informally, formally, office hours, emails, call, text, whatever. You got to still teach. Quick recap, and I got to go. Thinking. If you can't relate, you can't educate. You have to understand their thinking, not to change it, but to use it as momentum so you can take them further. You've got to focus on your teaching, remembering that specific needs, specific seeds require specific needs. Inside-out approach. Your techniques and methods must match your students' thinking, and that lets you put accommodations in place to individualize. That student will think you're teaching only them. I don't care if you have 200 students in your course. And technology, turned down for what? When I can turn it up with technology. You can expose them to resources that meet their modalities and multiple intelligence. You can answer questions before they even have them. You can assess students at will, and that instant feedback just dials up your ability to make sure all your students, at potential or not, are successful. So at this point, I think we're at a place where we have a question answer period. But I'm going to put something out there for you to think about with your question answers. So whether you're an instructional designer, an instructor, an administrator, student services, when you think about these 3 T's, thinking, teaching, and technology, which of those are underdeveloped in you, in your opinion, right? And what can you do about it to help them grow? So as we answer these questions, here's my final quote, and I'm going to be quiet. I promise, right? When you work to create that fluid synergy between that 3T triad, when it's all working together, I guarantee you that it's going to increase the positive impact that you have on all your students, whether they're at potential or advanced. I'm Dr. Newt. Hopefully you grab some morsel that you can educate yourself, motivate yourself, and help yourself grow. Thanks for listening.
Wow. Dr. Miller, that was such a powerful way to start our conference. Thank you so much for that inspirational keynote. Before we start our Q&A, I do want to remind our attendees that the Ask a Question feature for MediaSite is the little white speech bubble in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Go ahead and use that to ask questions. We have some great ones coming in. I do want to give voice to a few people who have asked, will the slides be up and available? Yes, they will be in Guidebook. If they're not already there, go ahead to a session. You'll see in his hand, that's part of his handouts. Will this session be recorded? Yes, it has been recorded, and all links to the recorded sessions will be sent to you after the conference. And thirdly, Dr. Miller, we had so many people through the Ask a Question and on Twitter who are saying how energized and motivated and thankful and appreciative of this message that you gave us today. So I want to make sure that gets through to you before we start our Q&A. So Karen, I am going to hand it over to you.
All right, thanks. So our first question is from Sarah. She asks, I've noticed you using the phrase at potential to describe students who are often termed at risk. I like this framing. Could you say more about how and why you use the phrase at potential?
Well, it's glass half empty or glass half full. We either look at things from a deficit model or a positive surplus model, and I choose to see life from a vantage point of opportunity. So in essence, whenever there's a door or an opportunity for you to do something different in life, there's always going to be some opposition in front of that door, right? So instead of getting discouraged at the opposition, I think that we should get excited that there's opposition, because that means there's a sign that is blocking me from something greater. So I use at potential because the reality is that students know when they, have some deficits. So why should I add to that deficit by calling them at risk, which has a negative connotation? And I'm going to acknowledge that there's a barrier there, you guys. When I use that word at, there's a barrier there because it sounds like at potential. I mean, at risk. I say at potential so much that I right? At risk. So when I say at potential, it lets them know that I believe that there's something better they can do. And the deal is this: I don't care who you are, a student or a child, they're not going to do or be, or even adult, just what they think they can do or be on their own. They're not going to do or be what you think that they can do or be just because you think it. They're going to accomplish what they can possibly be when they think that you think they can accomplish that thing. So we're that catalyst. So we need to add that, not just in our actions, in our teaching, but in what I say. You're at potential. We're all at potential. I have some potential for growth in areas in my life, so it applies to all of us.
Great. Our next questions are really about large class sizes. So people really priding themselves in terms of interacting with students and walking around the room and asking questions. Yeah. So a couple of questions have alluded to this idea of how do you get to know your students' characteristics and their thoughts when you have over 100 students, or you can't connect with them one-on-one because you're not face-to-face. So ideas, that kind of thing related to large class.
So you're not going to like my answer. And that's why I put the slide in with the Janet Jackson principle. And that's why we even teach our students who are going to be teachers in face-to-face classes, K-12, we teach them the Janet Jackson principle. So I love to teach, and I love the rapport. I love the interaction with my students, especially in urban districts where I believe I can help them see a different possibility for their lives. Because I grew up urban, right? But I have learned teaching online these last 12 years or so that I have to sacrifice, and we use the word sacrifice, looking for that personal one-to-one relationship at first with my students. And I have to I'm going to use the word back in. I have to back into that relationship by just focusing on the thing that we have in common. The thing we have in common at this point is the content in the class. Really, they want an A or a B so they can pass this course, go to the next one, and, complete their degree. That's what we have in common at first, and I'm okay with that. So how I let them know who I am is by what I do for them. What can I do for you lately? I'm gonna put this in place and this in place and this place because I know these things might be going on in your life. And here's what I need. If you need some time, contact me. Right now, I've taught courses that had 150 students, and I've taught courses that had 8 students, right? In those very large classes, that's a lot of emails that I might get from some at first. But what it kind of levels out after a while. So here's the deal. When I say, this is what I can do for you, this is what I put in place because I know this is what's going on in your life. When students start to email me, they start to share things about their life with me. I never even asked them. And I don't even have to share anything else about mine. I can now step into Dr. Newt mode where I, give them some positivity, or I give them some energy, or I give them an experience that another student may have had, or something that can help them move forward. So that I sacrifice trying to walk around and make friends at first by just saying, hey, this is what we have in common. And this is how I can help you succeed at this thing, because I know what you really want is this A or B, because I'm the gateway to your next course. So I know you may not like that, but it works in the end. And I'll tell you this before I move from this question, is that I still get students over the years. A matter of fact, just last month, a student graduated a while ago, is now entering another program at another university to do their dissertation, called me, talked to me on the phone for an hour about whether they should do it and, you know, kind of, you know, possible topic things in that. So you build relationships with your students as a result of this by backing into it around the content. What can I do for you lately?
So now that we are motivated, energized, and ready to get going, it's time to focus your vision and see the future today. Enjoy the program, everybody.